Welcome, welcome everyone. Um, Welcome to our webinar titled The Long Road Back, which focuses on the travel and tourism industry. Today, we're going to talk about how to make travel worthwhile again. In this webinar, we're going to outline potential business opportunities and value propositions that can be implemented around travel. We had so much fun working on this exercise, and we hope to inspire you, and above all else, let's enjoy this time together. Before we begin, let me introduce my colleagues and today's speakers. My name is Serdar Paktin, and I'm the founder of Pakt sensemaking agency. Shirsha is working on user research, and Vijay is working on cultural strategy. Well, welcome, guys.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Let me briefly walk you through how we're going to present you today. We're going to start by introducing Pakt briefly, and then we're going to talk about our approach and focus areas. Then we're going to dive into 4 territories that present opportunities, and then we're going to tie it up with a summary, and then we're going to go into Q&A session. Let me begin by introducing Pakt. And Pakt is a holistic sense-making agency. What we do is we find creative solutions for your business problems. How we do it is that we create new perspectives to assist organizations in making sense of cultural systems. That is a bit abstract, so let me take inspiration from a writer who explained this very nicely. Marcel Proust has a saying. He says, "The true voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but having new eyes." And that's what we're trying to do. Since this uncertain and ambiguous environments, we're trying to understand what's going around us and create new meanings around this. We have 4 key industry agnostic offerings, one of which is creative sense-making exercise that we're going to focus on today. The other is immersive culture safari that gives and immerse you into a curated experience where you can get firsthand lived insights through interactions. The other is holistic future visioning that creates rigorous future scenarios. And the last one, sense check for projects, which is cross-checking if your project is relevant and meaningful in target culture. So what are the benefits of this? It's all about gaining a deeper understanding, creating meaningful connections, and establishing cultural relevance. There are 4 main areas of implementation that you can use, but it's not limited to that. One is expanding into new markets or gaining new perspectives on the existing markets, understanding target audiences, improving brand positioning, and developing products and services. Through this webinar today, we will present to you how sense-making enables us to create new meanings and develop novel business strategies. And further ado, let's dive in and see how we might make travel worthwhile again. I'll start with the approach, and then we're going to continue with focus areas. Today's creative sense-making exercise, we've been working on how our sense of time is changing with the influence of the pandemic for a while. We wanted to implement some of our learnings into different industries. And here's the one on travel and tourism industry. This today webinar is neither a trends report nor an insights document. This is an exercise in future-oriented thinking using the sense-making approach, where we decode events happening around us and create new meanings with them, which we can then translate into business opportunities. And the key question that we're going to focus on today is how might we make travel worthwhile again? And then I'm going to hand on to Vijay here to explain how we choose our investigation areas. Please join in, Vijay.
Thank you, Sadar. We considered 4 paradigms in travel. We looked at the time we spend, the space we occupy, the actions we take or conduct, and at the metaphysical level, the mind or spiritual existence we spend or occupy in travel. We place them on intersecting axes. The intersection areas give us time-space, which is the logistical time spent in travel, space action, which is how we engage with the space, mind time, which refers to the quality time for the mind and soul, And the fourth territory finally is mind action, which deals with how we can move to the past and future. We found two implication areas for each quadrant, which we'll expand upon in a bit. In time space, right? We've coined a neologism called isolide. For the second implication area, we touch upon seamless travel. And similarly, we look at two implication areas for in each of the other three quadrants. So in space action, we looked at space as ritual and space as activity. In mind time, we looked at remove yourself and immerse yourself. While in the last one, mind action, we looked at seeing with new eyes and seeing with new tools. Now we're going to first talk about time space, and my colleague Shirsha is going to take over from me right now.
Thank you so much, Vijay, for explaining this approach. And thanks, Sardar, for explaining what sense making was all about. Just one thing, everyone can just put in their questions as we speak on the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A session, as we said at the end. So let's come to time space. Here in this quadrant, I'm actually going to talk about logistical time. That is the quantified sense of time, the amount of time that goes into traveling between point A to point B. And in this sense of time, we feel that logistical time has that contextual similarity to the capsular nature of the roller coaster experience. What do we mean by that? There are actually two dimensions of this experience that we want to operationalize in the idea of logistical time. The first dimension is that of that slow build up. In every roller coaster, we have that time when we slowly go up to the pinnacle, to the crescendo. It's slow, and people are actually building up that anticipation of the thrill that's going to come ahead. And here we make the comparison with the quarantine time that now has become mandatory. The second aspect, the second dimension of the roller coaster experience is that, even though we feel that it is very dangerous, it is thrilling, but at the end of the day, we know that it is a safe ride. We know that we will reach safely. And that's the assurance of safety that is guaranteed, which is a concern that many of our travelers are currently facing today. So in that sense, when we operationalize that crescendo, we are speaking about ISO holiday. Quarantine time is now become mandatory. People are staying 5 days, 10 days at a destination in their hotel rooms. Time slows down. There is it becomes very liminal because you're actually waiting for the actual travel to start. And for a lot of people, this is kind of seems like time is lost. So our idea is that why not make this time more enjoyable as if it is already on a holiday? So make this isolation into iso holiday. So the whole idea is to fill it with activities that help build that anticipation. And in our research, and coming from where I am right now, Dutch tourists actually applied to the government so that they could plan out their quarantine time in a Greek resort. So there is a sense that this is time lost, and it is a very fertile ground. And the value proposition that we have is that to turn this isolation, self-isolation time into an opportunity, into an ISO holiday. Now, the second dimension is basically we are all concerned with the exposure to the outside world. There is a threat out there, and a lot of effort, a lot of travelers are doing is into reducing that exposure. A lot of planning goes into it. And people want to have that feeling of the safety net. So the concern is basically about having that safety net and yet experiencing the world out there. So the idea is to provide a safety net that allow people to watch, the world from a protected cocoon. And while, savoring the outside world while remaining sealed within it. Here we got that analogous example of people traveling in that Swiss train with huge windows and looking out to the mountains. And that's actually when we realized that the Orient Express is considering opening up their original plan of London to Istanbul and terming it as, you can watch Europe from the safety of the coupe, of the railway coupe. So the idea, the value proposition thereby here is to provide a protected yet a very delightful travel experience. So we are done with traveling. And now what do we do when we get there? And that's where Sardar comes in with his ideas.
Thank you, Shusha. It was very interesting. So the second part is the space action dimension, and space action dimension is based on the activities that we do in that space that we arrive. And this territory has contextual similarity to, as we thought, would be a religious experience, because temples and other holy places have embedded rituals and activities that are making that place special and emotionally bonding. So we operationalize two dimensions from this metaphor, and one of which is meaningful emotional engagement with the magic of the space. So the space could create a kind of engagement. And the second one is physical activity that is corporeal equivalents of spiritual cleansing. So in that first dimension, we took space as ritual. The religious places are built around rituals, that those rituals enable people's interactions with the space, make it meaningful. It creates a sense of magical and relieving aspect to the space. And those rituals in time become more and more meaningful. For example, millions of Muslims go to Mecca to do their pilgrimage every year. And there are certain rituals and activities that they are supposed to do, such as circumambulating the Kaaba 7 times during their travels and during their visit to Mecca. So we focused on this ritual aspect of travel, and we are offering businesses to look for rituals that they can design or organize around things. Because the pandemic has removed all types of social and cultural activities from our lives, and being locked in our homes for so long, we all have an enormous cooped up energy waiting to be released. This provides businesses in the travel industry to invent and design new rituals that would help people relieve and release their energy in meaningful ways within nature and the other environments. And those new rituals can become new areas of tourism that can grow as people repeat and invite new people to those experiences. For example, maybe not a very good example, but it has been a growing trend among younger generation to go to Peru in order to live the ayahuasca experience in the last decade. And this is becoming a ritual for certain people, and they're repeating that, repeating that ritual. So we can build rituals that can become habits. So the main value proposition behind this is create rituals centered around the joy of cathartic release that that would release the cooped up energy from lockdown. The second part is space as activity. And because the physical activities that are done, it is related to physical activities that are done in those spaces. And we've been locked in our homes for so long that we are yearning for space and nature. So we're looking for things that would make up for the lost time. And people want to engage and interact with nature in meaningful ways, which makes purposeful and activity-based holidays more tempting. And we see the increase in activity-based holidays around the world. For instance, working farm holidays has been increasing, business retreats based around working in nature, and other types of agritourism has increased with the effect of the pandemic. And the main value proposition behind this is offer activity-based holidays that connect with the space. From this, I'm going to move into our next quadrant, next territory, which is the mind time and how we engage our mind and soul within our travels. And this quadrant has contextual similarity to this artistic experience, because the ecstatic state of the mind and soul while having quality time is very similar to creative or artistic experience. And we got two indicators that are the two dimensions that we operationalize in this context. Is the artist loses connection with the outside world in the process of creation, And the second is making art instills an out of time feeling for the person. In here, we'll get some help from Da Vinci and how he explains art is done. And Sigmund Freud actually borrowed this explanation while talking about psychoanalysis as well. Da Vinci says that art was created in two ways. One is by way of adding things like paint to the paper on the canvas, or by way of removing, like chiseling away stone while making sculpture. So we focused on these two aspects of making art into the mind time dimension. And we came up with one area similar to Da Vinci's approach to art. We implemented the removal aspect to travel. We are surrounded by technology and digital tools in our homes, which are almost owning all our time. To be able to relax your mind and soul during travel, it might be a good way to remove technology and constant pressure of notifications from your vacation. So this could be called as a joy of missing out, because life under lockdown intensifies the pressure to stick to calendars and digital prompts, and people need a space to feel liberated from anything that sucks them back in. For instance, Allegheny Mountains in West Virginia, which is a blend of pine-dotted peaks towering above meandering rivers, supplies the perfect backdrop for an unplugged getaway where cell service and Wi-Fi are banned. So the cell service and Wi-Fi are not banned recently. It's been banned for a long time, but we see that there's an increase of people going into that region during the pandemic and with the effect of the pandemic. So the main value proposition here that we propose is remove technology to create deeper connections with yourself and within yourself. The second approach, by way of adding, in terms of making arts, is immerse yourself, add yourself into nature, add yourself into space, and that helps you a way to forget about yourself, because people have lost stimulation that allows them to feel that they are part of the bigger world. Provide opportunities that allow them to apply and lose themselves to become one with the environment, and you don't know how time is passing. And while we were preparing for this presentation for this deck, we found out that St. Lucia has actually started an extended stay program a few weeks ago that offers travelers to plan their visits in an extended stay time. So they're offering people to stay 6 weeks or more, and then they launched this campaign video last week. And in here, they're inviting people to don't just visit, become part of it, or make yourself family, or don't just be amazed. And they say be immersed. So they're providing this immersion into the space, in a wider space and a longer time, to help you more be grounded with your environment. And in this case, the main value proposition that we could offer to businesses is offer immersive experiences that make people forget about themselves. So these are the two quadrants following Shirshas. And then we're going to go into the fourth quadrant, which is mind action. And my colleague Vijay is going to take over from here.
Thanks, Sadar. This quadrant space, mind action, it focuses on leveraging nostalgia and new tools. So for the next slide, right, traveling in our mind to the past and evaluating it with fresh eyes, or seeing the future through the lens of technology available in the present, that's contextually similar to the function of a time machine. Think of the DeLorean in Back to the Future. Right? Michael J. Fox's character revisits his past, for example, and ends up seeing his parents with completely new eyes, to say the least. And the time machine allows you to go into the past, and the future, and see things that you haven't realized before, and it gives you meaning in the present, in your present. Businesses could operationalize two dimensions of this time machine metaphor. One, by reclaiming positive memories of a place and seeing that through new eyes. Two, leveraging technology to inhabit distant places. So let's look at the first dimension that we operationalize, seeing with new eyes. In the Woody Allen film, right, To Rome with Love, Alec Baldwin's character goes to Rome to live his memories and relive his youth. And when you revisit your memories, do you remember the first foreign holiday that you took? How did it feel? I mean, the first book that you ever read. So yeah, people basically, right? In the next slide, right? People basically they need a reminder of happier times to inject some hope in their lives. The business opportunity here would be to help people rediscover their happy place so they can reclaim joy and replenish their source of resilience, energy, and optimism. And for example, right, New York City is investing $30 million towards bringing tourists back. Now, one of their strategies ought to be based on the principle that folks must, folks ought to be inhabiting their memories and living their favorite memories of New York City. In terms of the value proposition that we're proposing, consequently, right, channelize your happy memories to reactivate those treasured bonds of comfort for people using their past experiences. Now, let's look at the second dimension of the time machine metaphor that we could operationalize. We call it seeing with new tools. This one's about fully harnessing the potential of technology and new tools to help people travel without leaving the comfort of home. For this one, right? I mean, we aren't necessarily saying something dramatically new, but we're offering a slightly different perspective. We call this traveling without moving. Um, People have spent so much time in lockdown now that many would really hesitate to travel. It induces anxiety, right? And the idea would be to make AR, VR technology more accessible and mainstream to help people escape their bubble so they can experience distant spaces without sacrificing on the quality of lived experience. For example, right, the German National Tourist Board has created these 360-degree videos, like video trips basically across the country, as well as its Baltic and North Sea coasts that can be accessed using an Oculus Rift headset. Another set of videos that use, that uses Microsoft's HoloLens smart glasses, right? It takes travelers to some of the country's most famous castles and palaces. Now the HoloLens, right, isn't really accessible at this point, though. It actually costs $3,000, and it might actually be cheaper to travel to the destination in some style. So our suggestion is to find ways to make such technologies accessible at this point in time, and this is the precise moment to capitalize on, given the circumstances. And there's also a lot of content and production that's being done by influencers and individuals at the micro level. So we got to make this a business opportunity. And our value proposition, what we're suggesting to businesses, is going beyond the boundaries of physical space to essentially reimagine, and reconceptualize travel itself. Those are the two dimensions we believe can be successfully operationalized in the mind travel quadrant. And as you can see, we have our 4 dimensions sort of mapped out now, our 4 quadrants mapped out now. And now to take complete stock of the quadrant map and the sense-making exercise, here's Sadar, I guess, to tie things up in the summary. Over to you, Sadar.
Sure, Vijay. Thanks very much. That was very inspiring. So we talked about today's webinar in 4 key areas that we determined would be able to create meaning. And it's like the first one was time space, and we offered leveraging quarantine time into an opportunity and making isolation holidays or ISO holidays, and providing the end-to-end journeys as in seamless travel where people would be protected but still be able to engage with the world. And the space action side, we took the space, the meaningfulness of the religious spaces and offered space as ritual and defining new rituals that's going to open up people to different spaces, which is going to help them release the cooped up energy. And the space as activity, which is also offering people activities in open space that would become, again, a way of relieving that cooped up energy. In the mind time quadrant, we talked about remove yourself and immerse yourself, basing on the artistic experience to release our minds and forget about ourselves or forget about time. And in that one, removing yourself, it was based on removing technology and leaving everything else outside and just focusing on the moment. And also in immersing yourself, which is going into the space for longer periods without becoming a part of that environment. And in the fourth quadrant, we talked about mind action, in which we were talking about seeing with new eyes, is using the nostalgia element in inviting people visiting places they had good memories before, and relive those memories and become hopeful for the future. And also seeing with new tools is going to offer make technology more accessible for the people who are not ready to leave their homes and travel again. And this in this way they could provide them opportunities to travel without moving. And this is what we wanted to talk about today. Thank you.
And thank you so much for, yeah, that wonderful summarization. In fact, we can put that slide still on and ask people about any questions that they might have about this presentation that we had, about ideas and thoughts.